Welcome to Commander Central, episode 298, and today we'll be talking about reanimation in EDH. I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Tristan.
Tristan, welcome aboard. How's it going?
Good, thank you for having me.
So why don't you introduce yourself and tell the listening audience a little bit about who you are?
Sure. I'm Tristan and Helden. I started playing Magic technically when Commander 2019 came out.
Okay.
But I bought a precon. And I did not change any of the cards so I really started playing Magic when Theros Beyond Death came out.
Okay. So what got you into Magic in the first place?
I started playing D&D shortly beforehand, and our D&D was also at our LGS. So I got there a little early and often, and then I started watching people play Magic, and I'm like, what is this card game? And I
Nice.
sort of learned from there.
Was there a reason you jumped into the deep end of the pool with Commander right away?
Yes, that was the only thing people were playing on that that afternoon every week.
Well, so that's kind of the tricky thing, right? Like Commander's brutal to learn. There's 25,000 cards or something that are legal, and 4 players, a ton to keep track of. The games go longer or whatever. Like it's challenging for a new player, but it's also really like the one thing where you can just buy a deck that's all self-contained right there and immediately sit down and play. So like that's a challenge. It's simultaneously the best way to jump into the game and the worst way, I think. What was the precon you started with?
The Flashback one.
Okay, sure. So you're starting with a relatively difficult mechanic right away as well for a new player to learn and play with.
Yep. I bought that and a store precon that was tokens. So I was making tokens.
So your store sold like 100 card precon decks as well that like they had brewed up and put together?
Yeah, pretty much. It was like half the price of the Commander decks at the time.
Okay.
And it's like, hey, for people to learn Commander.
Sure, right.
That's a really cool idea. Like,
yeah, actually.
It's a way for a store to
well.
move inventory and then get people playing EDH.
That is a good idea. We should probably mention that at our LGS and suggest that they do that. Get Chris to brew some decks around the side and throw some cards together.
It's just going to be all red decks. That's all
right, yeah. It'll just be all like EDH burn decks for people. So Tristan, I have a question here that's been a thing I've been thinking about a lot lately. I was just on the Commander Smith's podcast. By the time this airs, it will have been a week ago or so on their 200th episode. And we talked a lot about kind of power ratings of decks. And one of the things I've been thinking about in terms of power is how much, like, it's obviously very variable, like what one group is, calling a 5 or 6, another group might call a 7 or 8, whatever. There's a lot of sway there, but it really does depend a lot on your play group or kind of the ecosystem you play in. And I've been thinking a lot about how the ecosystem I play in is probably pretty atypical. Obviously, I talk about Commander a lot on, 2 podcasts, and I write about it. And so, I am not necessarily the average player in terms of my exposure to the format and how much I think about it. And I also play primarily with people who are very invested in the format. I play with people like Max, who also do a lot of, EDH stuff during the week. And I, play a lot of games with Matt and Joey from EDH Recast. And we play on stream with other content creators. So it's not even a meta thing because I play in a lot of different metas, but like just the environment in general I play in tends to be with people that are very involved in the daily ins and outs of Commander. And I think what that does is you get things like, like just yesterday I shot Max a DM. Hey, are you running this in your Brago deck, Max? Whatever. I don't remember what card it was.
Yeah.
But like that's a thing that happens like 3 times a week where somebody will hit me up with a card or I'll hit somebody up with a card and, oh, that's actually a good call for this deck. So like not only am I inundated with Commander stuff constantly, I'm constantly like making changes to decks or getting ideas from people for decks in ways that I think the average player doesn't experience. So as someone who's relatively new to Commander and Magic, but you're also kind of invested, right? Like you're invested enough as a patron supporter to be on the show right now. What is that like for you? Do you see big swings between the people you play with, like at your LGS, for example, that might be less invested and how they play and the cards they play with versus like maybe playing with people on Spell Table that you meet in our Slack or something? Do you see big like power swing differences or at least what people interpret to be a power difference in their decks?
Yes, a lot.
Okay. Any specific like examples that pop to mind?
Yes. So about 2 weeks ago now, I was playing on Spell Table with some people from a different server, and we had a talk and everything, and we're like,
Sure.
all right, these are roughly the same. One of them was playing the dinosaur that when it deals damage, you reveal off the top of your library and get that many dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Gishath.
Yep.
Gishath, yes. He was playing Gishath, and then played Gishath, passed the turn. We're like, okay, Gishath, we worry. Next turn, land destruction. And we're like,
Oh, sure.
this is not what we had in the conversation with the power level talk.
Right.
At all. And then also at my LGS, people are like, yeah, this isn't like super strong and stuff. And then they like demonic tutor or mystical tutor or just combo off by like turn 5 or 6.
Sure.
The power talk is very difficult sometimes.
Sure. Yeah, that one, like what card one group views as very strong, another card doesn't view as very strong, for sure. And that gets very difficult. Yeah, that was one of the things we talked about on the Commander Smith show, was like just how variable that kind of thing can be from group to group to group.
Yeah.
And even like I noticed it because like Max and I had a couple days on a vacation here recently where we were playing quite a bit of Commander, and even there you can kind of see it. You can see the difference between a deck that I am playing as someone who just is mercilessly making changes to my own lists, and a deck somebody else is playing where they don't. And even though the cards may on their surface appear to be the same, so like maybe neither of us have demonic tutors or neither of us have, specific combo pieces, the fact that the specific cards I've chosen work together in a way that someone else's deck might not makes a huge difference. But you also can't necessarily see that. Like if I gave a third party both deck lists and told them to just flip through, they just wouldn't see any discernible difference. But the way those decks play, because of the people who have put them together and have like fine-tuned how those pieces interact, really also like very much swings the power level of those things. And it's just a nightmare to try to quantify, I think.
Yeah.
Just don't change your decks. There you go. That's
right,
the
I guess. I guess, yeah.
Only play cards that are at least 10 years old, and then every year we can update our decks.
There you go. I like that. So you started with the precons, and I'm assuming you've like gone into brewing yourself then, it sounds like. So what is your favorite deck currently right now?
So my favorite deck is my mono black chainer deck.
Okay.
It's the deck that got me into liking mono black, and it's just sort of my baby deck now.
Well, and it's also fun to find effective old commanders. Like Chainer's old. That's originally an old frame card. It's 15, 20 years old, I think. Is it? I don't remember what site was that. Was that Weatherlight? It was before that even.
No, it was in, I believe
Torment.
It's Torment. That's the
Torment.
name of
Yeah,
the
there we
set?
go.
Yeah, Torment.
Yep, I'm looking right now. Yeah, like those old cards are super fun, and it's also like Chainer's not a commander you stumble across in the wild very often either.
Nope.
Yeah, very cool.
It's a really good effect.
Yes, right, and it's really good, and it's also like requires you to do specific things. Like you have to be interactive and have a plan, and be pretty aware of what's happening in the game around you to respond to those, like handle those triggers correctly. Yeah, that's a super fun deck. I'm glad to see you're into that one. What's your favorite card in that deck?
Can I choose the commander again?
You can, absolutely.
Yeah.
For probably a lot of the reasons I mentioned. Yeah, Chainer is a super cool card.
Yeah, just being able to like, oh, your Oracle Modiah. It died. My Oracle Modiah.
Too bad. Now, have you ran into, because I've run into this sometimes, where you find a situation like that where you normally would run one card, but because your commander wants to like take things from the graveyard, you're not running exile effects or something? Is that something that you've now found yourself bending that deck around?
Yeah, I don't run any exile removal. All my removal is destroy targets. Each player sacrifices things.
That always feels bad too. I've run into that in like a white deck or something where I know I want to do something with people's creatures, and I'm like, man, it feels bad not putting Source to Plowshares in this deck.
Luckily, black has enough to destroy things that you don't feel too bad.
Especially the last few years, I think we had a run there where it felt like black didn't have a lot of great removal. And yeah, the last couple of years, they've really, particularly in mono black, got much better pieces for sure.
Yeah.
It's a good segue into talking about games that we've played with that. Have you got any fun games into that deck recently?
Yes. So I have two good stories, if you don't mind.
Okay. Yeah, jump in.
So about last week, I was playing in a spell table game, and someone was playing the bridge, Prismatic Bridge, God Tribal.
Oh, sure.
And basically got a massive board state, and was like, I'm gonna mill you out and swing and kill the other two players. Well, they had the exploits to DC in their graveyard. So like in response to the mill, I'm like, I'm gonna reanimate that, exploit that with my 1 mana left, get my darkness out. Cast darkness. I die, but the other people live. I'm just
nice.
like, you mill me out. I'm gonna do my best to stop you.
Very nice.
Yeah. Other one
that always makes for a very memorable experience too, and like you can make that big play that changes everything out of nowhere.
Yep. I still lost because it was in response to a draw, so I decked myself.
Sure.
But the other players had an extra turn.
Very cool. What was the other one?
So it was about a month ago now. I was playing against a mill deck and 2 other decks. Well, one of the guys became arch nemesis pretty early. He was playing the Tassiker.
Okay.
So the mill guy was trying to mill him, and he hit his Shuffle Titan to shuffle the deck back in.
Yep.
And I just saw like, my Shuffle Titan. All right, mill guy, you can mill him out now. He has no Shuffle Titan.
Nice.
And that's how that guy lost.
That's a great way to screw up that plan. I like it.
Yep.
How about you, Max? Did you have any fun ones from our 5 or 6 days there we had to be able to just cram, half a dozen Commander games per day? Yeah.
Oh, we played so much. I don't remember anything too specific. I do remember kind of messing with Dan Krause's board a couple times just to make sure he couldn't get the kill on a couple people. We got to play against the Simic Frog. Our buddy Joe had a deck built around that.
Yep.
That was really cool to see pop off. And I got close to half a dozen games in with my new Tormod and Kamal deck, which worked twice. It did its thing 2 of the 6 times, so I'm on the right path for a Reanimator deck. So I'm happy.
Well, the one memorable Max thing I will point out is at some point early on in the week, someone was teasing me about messing up the Dromoka interaction where like he'd play Dromoka and I'd forget immediately, like, or have a plan and make Dromoka come down and screw my plans up. And like, oh, I meant to end of turn this. And then Dromoka came down and messed those, how it does by preventing me from casting spells. And then over the course of the next several days, every single person's like, yep, Dromoka got me. I did the same thing. So I felt much better about that when Dromoka apparently just screws up everyone's day.
That's the secret way to win with that deck. As long as someone gets Dromoka in that way, I'm okay with losing the game.
Exactly. The one is actually was a miss on my part, and it was someone else's turn. I was playing my Vela deck, and an attack I knew was going to come in, and I knew there was an answer there, and I couldn't put the pieces together. So I wound up using the Pongify I had in hand to kill whatever the big crazy creature swinging at me that was going to kill me was. In like 10 seconds after I did it, I saw all the pieces and realized what I had just missed. It wasn't my turn. It was, as you see, I was being attacked. But I did have Vela in play, who, whenever Vela or another creature I control leaves the battlefield, each opponent loses a life. I also had an Arcbound Crusher in play, which is a creature with modular, and whenever another artifact comes into play, you put a +1 counter on it. And I had it up to 8 or 9 counters or something on it. At the same time, I had a Myriad Construct in play, which is a 4/4, and I'd kicked it, so I'd put, I think 7 or 8 counters on it. So it was like an 11/11 or 12/12, but when it becomes a target of a spell or ability, you sacrifice it and create a number of colorless construct artifact creature tokens equal to its power. And I had a sack outlet out. I had like Ashen's Altar or something. And there was a Wormcoil Engine that was tapped as well. And I just didn't collectively put it all together until after I used the Pongify to remove the flyer that I couldn't otherwise deal with. And what the win was I could have sacrificed that Wormcoil Engine to make 2 Wormcoil tokens. That would have put 2 more counters on that Arcbound Crusher, would have generated like a 1 point of damage to that Wormcoil dying to everybody with the Vela trigger. I could have then sacrificed both of those 2 tokens as well to do 2 more damage to everybody else. Then I could have sacrificed that Arcbound Crusher to deal 1 more point of damage to everybody. Because it's modular, all those counters would have gotten moved over to that Myriad Construct, making it like a 20-something. I could have then targeted that with a Pongify, which would have triggered the sacrifice on it, and would have put 20 of those Construct tokens in play. It dying would have generated a death trigger off Vela, and then I could have just sacrificed all 20 of those Constructs to the altar to do 20 damage to everybody else. So literally I had a way to kill while being attacked, I could have killed the other people in the game, including the person attacking me. But I missed it at the last second. I cast the Pongify on the creature instead of my own creature. And I was just not putting everything together until it was too late. And I was so mad about it. I was because it would have been such a great play to have pulled off while I was being attacked. But it was one of those situations where I knew there were pieces there and I couldn't figure out how it would work until after it was too late.
Shucks.
Yeah. So that's a long story to talk about a play that actually didn't happen, but everything was there, and I was so frustrated after I missed it. So
That would have been a good play, though.
yes. So I'm telling a story anyway, because it was there. But if you out there in listener land have any cool plays that you made or cool plays you missed like me, how would you go about telling us about those, Max?
You can find us on all social media platforms by searching CMDR Central. You can also find us and our shows on YouTube by searching CMDR Central. And if you want to guest on the show or have a Decks You Play episode or just join our community to chat with us and play virtual EDH, you can go to patreon.com/CMDR Central and check out our reward tiers. We have a lot of new patrons to say welcome and thank you to since we took, last week off. So we have to say hello and welcome to Simon Terp, David Good, Willie Stone, Tyler Ashcroft, Andy Berger, Nathan Huffingale, Mark Mage, C.W. Cudney, Matthew Crayons, Logan Jolly, Kyle Gersher, Jason Vigiano, Cole Luke, and Michael George.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
Yeah.
Thanks to all of you new patron supporters. Thanks to existing supporters like Tristan. Thanks to everybody out there who supports us, even if it's just by listening to the show. It means a lot, and we appreciate it. And I think we have some giveaways to show some of that appreciation, Max.
Yeah, so if you continue to support us, or start supporting us by the end of the year, so the end of December, you'll be entered to win one of the following prizes via Patreon. You will be entered to win either a sealed Plane Chase Anthology from Chris, a sealed From the Vault Transformed from me, and a Grim Monolith from Urza's Legacy, donated by listener and supporter Matthias.
Thank you, Matthias. That was crazy generous of you to give us that Grim Monolith to give away. We appreciate it. Max, you and Chris donating those two things as well is really generous. I appreciate that, and so do our listeners. So thank you all very much for that. And again, thanks to everyone who supports the show any way you can. It's a big deal. It means a lot. It keeps the lights on. It keeps pants on Max. And it keeps the show on the air. So thank you all very much. Let's talk about one thing here briefly, because I lied on the show that aired last week, I think, talking about how we had a small break from new content coming out, and that's, not true, because as of recording the show today, Kamigawa Neon Dynasty spoilers are already going to be hitting.
Yeah, not happy about that, Dana. I wanted to make it till 2022 without new Magic cards hitting my social media feed, so...
I thought we were going to have a few days off, but that's just not how it works. So by the time this show will have aired, we will have already gotten a few of those cards.
We had Thanksgiving off.
That's true.
We had the physical day of Thanksgiving.
We can be thankful for having gotten Thanksgiving and a few days afterwards off, I suppose. I complain about it, about the amount of content, and it's a lot. It's exhausting. But really, if I wasn't a content creator, I could just avoid it. Like, I could just say, hey, listen, I'm not going to be looking at anything for 2 months. So if you got to do that, do it. I would suggest if it is too much for you, just take a couple months off. It's totally not a big deal. You do not need to fear missing out on anything. Those cards are going to be there when you come back. Take a breather. Don't worry about buying packs or staying up on every small thing if it is too much. Totally get it. Because it's a lot, for sure. Okay, y'all. Main topic today is reanimation. If you are someone who plays Chainer Dimension Master in EDH, you probably like the idea of bringing stuff from the graveyard back into play, generally at less cost than it would be to cast it in the first place. It's one of the most popular archetypes that you see in EDH Rec if you look for themes. My EDH Rec cast co-host Joey Schultz can't go 5 minutes without talking about how much he loves necromancy and resurrecting things on that show. It's his favorite theme and archetype as well. And Tristan, you mentioned it was your favorite thing to do in EDH.
Yep.
What is it about reanimation or that kind of playstyle that you like so much?
So I think originally, when I was still figuring out what kind of decks I like building and playing and everything, there was a lot of counterspell magic at my LGS before COVID. Okay. So I'm like, I cast creature. Now it's in the graveyard. Well, what can I do with this creature? Oh, I can just bring it back. That's awesome. Now I can get around these counterspells that keep affecting me, or this removal that keeps hitting my creatures.
Yeah, it's definitely a great way to get double duty, basically, out of the things you're playing. After they get destroyed, after they get countered, whatever, it's a way to still keep them coming back. Like, power-wise, it's generally very strong. One of the most notorious things you can do in Commander is to get a early Jin Jataxis in your graveyard and then reanimate it somehow. So it's back into play and locking everyone's hands out before they can even basically get lands onto the field. It's just a notoriously, not well liked, but super effective play you can do. So like I think the power level of Reanimation is really, really strong and people like that as well. And it's super flavorful. Like what is more flavorful than black bringing things back from the graveyard into play for sure. One observation I had that I want to start with here and to ask you guys about is, as a concept, Reanimation, at least for me, for whatever reason, feels like a thing I don't usually do in a deck unless that's the whole theme of the deck. I don't know why that is for me. So, for example, I don't think twice about putting an aura into a deck that isn't an aura themed deck. Like this, if this aura is great in my deck, I'll just run it. If an equipment is particularly good in a deck, or like life gain is useful in that deck, or landfall stuff is useful in that deck, even if it isn't a life gain deck, or even if it isn't a landfall deck, or an equipment deck, or an aura deck, whatever, I have no problem putting that in the deck. Not even about a problem, it's like it's logical to me to do so. Reanimation feels different, and I'm not really sure why that is. I think objectively, things like Reanimate or Animate Dead are probably worth running in almost any deck that can legally run them. There's almost always just going to be a target worth spending a single black mana or one black mana on to bring back into play. And that's even before you get into intentionally using those cards, like entombing a Jin-Gitaxias or something. The amount of value you get out of those things. If you're reanimating just an Eternal Witness or something, it's almost always worth the mana you spend, let alone someone's giant bomb dragon. And the only other thing I can maybe compare that to is things like stealing stuff, where similarly a control magic is probably almost always worth the cost you pay. Whatever you're taking, you're not getting control of it and you're taking it away from somebody else. And that transaction is almost always worth your time, if not significantly worth your time if you're taking something really powerful. But I tend to also not run theft effects unless the whole deck is stealing things. I tend to not run Animate Dead or Reanimate unless my deck is built around like doing graveyard shenanigans. So I'm curious if that's something that either of you two run into in terms of Reanimation. Obviously, if you're playing Chainer, you might have a bunch of Reanimation effects in that deck because your deck is just going to be built around doing that. But do you guys tend to, either of you two, do Reanimation, I don't know if casually is the right word, but like offhandedly maybe, where you're like, I'm building a black deck and it's probably worth putting a Animate Dead in here because it's such a good piece of value, so I'm just going to do it even though the deck doesn't do that. Is that something that you guys do? Is that part of your general toolbox, or is it a specific thing you do in specific decks, I guess is probably the best way to ask that. How about you, Max?
I think it is probably more often than not something specific I'm doing in the deck. But there is the case of Karmic Guide. I run Karmic Guide in a couple decks, Jamoka being one of them because it is a flying creature, but it does have that ability when it ETBs, you bring back a creature card from the graveyard to the battlefield from your graveyard. So that's really nice in Jamoka when all my creatures cost, 4 to 6 mana. Being able to pitch something early game knowing that, hey, I might be able to bring this back later is nice to have in the back pocket. It's not like super intentional, like, okay, I'm gonna entomb, Jin-Gitaxias and then reanimate it on turn 2. It's nothing that intentional. It's more of just in case of emergency, cast Karmic Guide, bring back a Hornet Queen.
Sure. There's just almost always a useful target for you, so you tend to run the card because there's just going to be something to hit every time.
Exactly.
Okay. That makes sense. Tristan, how about you? Is that something that, do you specifically tend to play Reanimation and Reanimation decks, or is it something that you do just for value in decks that can do it?
So, I have 5 Reanimation themed decks. So,
well, that makes sense. I mean, that probably does then makes it less likely for you to do it everywhere if you have 5 different decks that are doing it for sure.
No, I do it everywhere. On top of having 5 Reanimation decks, I do it everywhere because I'm like, now this giant Elder Dragon, it's in my graveyard. It's sad.
Yeah.
Hey, now it's not in the graveyard. It's awesome.
Now it's back. Yeah, I mean, objectively, from a power point of view, like I said, it's almost always worth doing. If it's, turn 4 or turn 5 and you top deck a Reanimation spell, there's almost always a target, let alone when it gets even later in the game than that, when some of those graveyards get really ridiculous with things in them. Yeah, you're just never, almost ever going to regret having that kind of thing in a deck, even if the deck isn't built around doing that, for sure.
I've started running, though, instead of just targeted, like the Reanimation or Animate Dead cards like Living Death, because
oh, sure,
I just get my whole graveyard back. So after, everyone gets their whole graveyard back, but again, if someone has the Jin-Gitaxias in their yard, I'm not going to cast this.
Right.
So
yeah,
it might be a dead card 1 in 10 games, but it can be a blowout too.
For sure. And yeah, you can just look and see like, oh, I'm just not going to, apparently I'm not using that this game. That graveyard's too scary.
Mm-hmm. Unless you Bajuka Bog it first.
Yeah. Well, okay. So yeah, for sure. Like Bajuka Bog, Scavenger Grounds, Soul Guide Lantern kind of things. As someone who uses a lot of reanimation, then you're presumably aware of how strong it is. Do you then also run ways to counter other people's reanimation?
Sort of.
Okay.
I make sure in any deck that has black, I run Bajuka Bog.
Sure.
I do run Scavenger Ground in like 1 or 2 decks, but it's also partially a lot of my cards need colored pips. And yep. I am like, if this was not a colorless, I would probably run it type deal.
Yeah, because Chainer alone is pretty mana hungry in terms of the ability, I believe, right?
Chainer is black, black, black.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's not almost every single ramp or artifact in this deck makes colored mana. Like, I cannot run the colorless ones because that 3 black is just it's strong. It's very strong, but it's you have to plan around the black, black, black. But
in Max, your deck that probably does the most of it will be your new zombie deck, right?
Yeah, that's my deck that does the most reanimation, just because a lot of the creatures are either filling my graveyard and bringing something back to my hand, or I have a lot of single creatures that are like reassembling skeleton, where I can pay an activation cost and put them right back on the battlefield. Hopefully Tormod's out, so I can just capitalize on paying 3 mana to bring something back from my yard, and I make a zombie token on top of it. But I really don't pack a lot in any of my decks that battle someone using their graveyard. I think I run Scavenger Grounds in all my decks, and that's it.
Sure.
I don't like Scavenging Ground in most of my decks, because it exiles your graveyard too.
Yes.
That's it. One important
downside.
Where I think I run it in one deck, because it's the one deck I have that have no graveyard interaction.
Right.
So exile and graveyard's the same for me in that deck.
Yeah, I definitely agree. In a graveyard deck, you gotta be careful when you use it, but I think I'd rather devote that slot to Scavenger Grounds in my deck versus something like a Soul Guide Lantern or a Relica Progenitus that will take an artifact slot and just sit there, where at least the Scavenger Grounds, I may never use that to actually exile graveyards in the entire game. At least I'm getting mana off of it throughout the game.
Now, when you are playing Reanimation, you like I said, you don't use Scavenger Grounds or something because you don't want to hit your own graveyard, which makes sense. Do you run defense against Reanimation? Like, if you're playing blue, would you play a stifle kind of effect to stop that someone else's Bajuka Bog or something? Or is that just not is that something you just accept is going to be a problem once in a while, and you just have to hope you can play around it?
So I hope I can play around it. A lot of my reanimations instance, like Chainer's instant speed, so
right, yep.
I can hold up mana until end step, or someone tries Bajuka Bog me and get the important people out. I also run Stifle. I don't run a lot of blue. Blue is one of my lower. It's not my least favorite color, but it's not one of the colors I like playing a lot. But I do run Stifle in a couple of my blue decks for that exact reason. I had an Realmy of the Dead Tide, and I ran all the Stifle effects because of Bajuka Bogs and things.
Well, I don't do a lot of graveyard stuff, so it's not something I am super concerned about. But that's interesting to hear, because I think I've only ever one time seen someone stifle like a Bajuka Bog trigger or something, but it was devastating to see happen. If you're like the person like, okay, I'm gonna need to deal with this graveyard because something bad's gonna happen next turn, and like, okay, I'm dropping the Bajuka Bog, and like, just to have that get blown out, and like, I have nothing else. That was my one defensive response. I'm screwed. Like, that was, I don't know if I would devote a slot to it necessarily, but like, if you're doing a lot of graveyard stuff, people are gonna try to stop you, and you might be in every port in the storm kind of situation where like even that's worth having a few of those effects in hand just to keep that graveyard whole, for sure.
I definitely think that type of decision is very meta dependent, because
yes, good call.
Like, if you play with the same 4 to 6 people every week and 2 of them have multiple graveyard decks, then yeah, it's probably smart slotting in your Stifles and your graveyard hate and everything like that. But if you go to an LGS or you play via Spell Table or different discords, you don't really know who you're going to run up against, so I don't want to fill a slot with something that I might see. I'd rather just eliminate the player, and that's, for me personally, I just build a lot of my decks to do combat damage, and I hopefully can identify that graveyard player early in the game, like before turn 5, and then just focus on them the rest of the game.
Yeah, and be ready for it. Like, you're like, okay, I just need to, if I possibly can, leave that Scavenger Grounds untapped and leave those 2 mana untapped. Not so much even to stop like the one-off creatures, but like you just can't let someone drop a Living Death, for example, against that Reanimation deck, or God forbid, a Rise of the Dark Realms is even worse. Yeah, that it's a tricky line to walk, though, too, right? You don't like waste mana every turn leaving the Scavenger Grounds available to be used, but there's been so many situations where I've tapped it, not paying attention really, and then just gotten screwed the next turn because somebody does something with their graveyard. I'm like, I could have dealt with it, and I tapped Scavenger Grounds instead of, some other random land that I left open.
So when the decks I run the Stifle in, and to protect against the graveyard, I also have other cards in the deck that benefit off of a Stifle effect. Like with around me, you can stifle the sacrifice at end of turn trigger, so you can keep the token around. So it's like, yes, like blankly running a stifle just to protect against the chance of a Bojuka Bog or Scavenger Ground is bad. But if you have other ways of, it might not be the best card in that slot like overall, but it's running duality of it's going to protect your graveyard 1 out of 10 times.
Right.
But 6 out of the 10 times, it's going to help your gameplay. So it's like, it's not bad. And that's it. If the duality of the card.
Well, it's also one of those things where, like, I don't know how seriously you can really plan to deal with the graveyard player or the reanimation player either. Like, okay, if you're playing black, you can put the Bojuka Bog in there alongside the Scavenger Grounds. So you have 2 lands that will perhaps help solve problems a little bit. And you can throw in a Soul Guide Lantern or, Lantern of Souls or something, which is one of the newer ones, or a Grafdigger Cage or whatever. Like, you can throw an artifact in there. A lot of times there's creatures that maybe work with your deck that also have some graveyard interaction, like a Scavenging Ooze or something in your deck, where it's a good card in your deck in general, and it has a bit of an option to hit someone's graveyard. But like at that point, you're talking, okay, four cards, and that's maybe a best case situation where you're playing black-green or something and have access to Scavenging Ooze and have access to Bojuka Bog, and you've put a couple of these cards in your deck, so you've got a 4 or 5 cards total that you can maybe hit that will deal with that graveyard person. There's no guarantee anyone else is going to have those cards either. And if a person's got Chainer in their command zone, and every turn they are trying to reanimate something, in addition to whatever other spells they have in their deck that might interact with graveyards as well, it's a losing battle. Like unless you are going to go crazy and just put a dozen different ways to stop people from interacting with their graveyard in your deck, they are going to get ahead of you. You're going to occasionally bog them at a bad time, but then 2 turns later, they're going to have 4 things back in the graveyard they're going to want to reanimate, and you've already used your 1 in 4 answers and might not see the rest. So I do think for the dedicated graveyard player, you can try to slow them up, but like statistically speaking, odds are they're just going to have more answers than you have solutions.
One thing I will note though is for me personally, not with like Marin and stuff, because that's end of turn. Marin's really strong, but it's once a cycle. Chainer's instant speed as much mana as you have. In my Chainer deck, I tend not to run a lot of actual other reanimation cards. Okay. I run Strains the Night because that's pretty much a copy of Chainer, and that's an enchantment, but I don't run the Animate Deads or the one-time effects. Because why devote a slot when my commander does it for pretty much the exact same?
Yeah, it's tough. You want some redundancy in case your commander's gone or has been spent, too much to cast or something. But then you get in that problem where you don't want 2 of those effects in hand while your commander's out either, because you can't. They don't really stack necessarily. Yeah, that's a real tricky balance to find for sure. So, Tristan, what are the 5 or 4 or 5 different commanders you have for your animation decks?
My main ones that are reanimation focused are I have a Minioplasm deck.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Mono Black Chainer. Marin. I have Cephas, the Adventure of the Forgotten Realm dungeon. When a creature card puts in your graveyard, you can venture. When you complete a dungeon, you reanimate.
Okay.
So, and then I have a Taste of Karloff deck. That's not pure reanimation, but it has some reanimation effects. And I just built the Estic Auric Overlord?
Yes,
and then Awaken the Blood Avatar. I have Awaken the Blood Avatar deck, and that has a lot of reanimation effects in there too.
Okay.
I think that's all of them.
Max, do you have any commanders that are specifically things that care about reanimation, or do you just happen to have some things in decks once in a while?
Outside of the Tormod deck that cares about things leaving my graveyard. No, it's just things within my deck. So like Brago has Sun Titan, Dramoka has that Karmic Guide, Tuvasa has a bunch of ways to bring stuff back out of the yard via like Replenish and Reclaim, and the other one that brings all the auras back from Planar Chaos. I don't remember the name off the top of my head, though.
Retether, I believe?
That one, yep. So I have things that do that, but I don't have a deck, I would say, that is specifically, like, Reanimation. Like, back in the day, I had a Marin deck, and then I just took it apart because it's Marin, you know.
You tend to do a little bit more recursion than you do necessarily reanimation.
Correct.
Okay. Sure. So Tristan, when you play Reanimation, that stuff in your deck, what is the kind of the win conditions? Like, what are you hoping to get to? Is it just you're trying to amass more value than anybody else and hope that you can find a way to win a game from amassing that value? Or is there some other specific way you're hoping to win those games using it?
Okay, so a lot of my Reanimation decks also have a sub-theme of aristocrats.
Okay, sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
So mine is Chainer, which has a... Do you guys know the Chainer combo?
Top of my head, I don't. I think I've seen it because I remember Don Miner, who runs EDH Rec, has a Chainer deck he's had for a long time. And I remember him comboing, but I can't remember what the combo was specifically.
So the main combo with Chainer is okay if I explain it?
Yep, go right ahead.
Of course.
Right. So it's Chainer. You need Chainer out. 3 black mana and 4 life, because that's the minimum to activate Chainer. A Phyrexian Altar. The one that sacks a creature to add black, pretty much. A Blood Artist effect or Zulaport Cutthroat effect, and then either Grave Titan or Wormcoil Engine. So what you do is if it's Wormcoil Engine, you sack Wormcoil Engine to the altar, get your 2 tokens, and ping person for 1, and you gain 1 life, and then sack those other 2 for 2 more black, and then you gain 3 life in total in that interaction. You can use that 3 life and the 3 mana you just made to bring Wormcoil right back out. And then cycle that and ping everyone to death. It's the same thing with Grave Titan. That's just an enter the battlefield, not a death part of that, but it's the same loop.
And that's also a combo that requires a lot of moving pieces. So, like, it's not something you're assembling really quickly.
No,
you have to have gotten all that stuff out and be able to assemble. I mean, that's kind of like the platonic ideal of a fair EDH combo, right? People have to have either ran out of removal or not ran removal or something for you to assemble all of that together to get that to work.
Well, the thing is, other than the altar, you can play, if you have enough mana, you can play Chainer and just bring those other 2 pieces out of your
grab all
right
the pieces
away.
Right there. Sure.
Yeah, so other than the artifact. But a lot of them, the ways I win, other than is amassing a big board state, sacking them and pinging everyone to death with a Blood Artist effect, or just bringing Gary or Kakusha, the Evening Star, back and back and back, and just loop that.
Even better if it's somebody else's that you've been able to grab, so you can't even they can't even blame you. Like, hey, if you wouldn't have played it, I couldn't have used it.
I did win once with Chainer with someone else's Dockside Extortionist, because that gave me the black mana I needed to cast my Gary, my Great Merchant, and then loop the 2 of them because I had a sack outlet. Nice. And I'm like, you, how are you mad at me? It was your
you did this.
It was your Dockside. Like I could not have done this without your Dockside.
Literally, the first time I ever tried to put Mindslaver into my Glissa deck, which has a combo, you know, if you have a way to force an opponent to attack you or something and you can block with Glissa, it lets you recur the Mindslaver and use it again. Like, there's ways to loop Mindslaver, but I didn't have any of them in my deck. And literally the first time I put it in there, I was playing in a game, 2 people got eliminated, and it was down to Chris and I. And on my turn, I'm like, well, I need to do something. I played the Mindslaver, and I'm like, what do you have over there? And he didn't even catch it right away either. We're looking at what he's like, well, I got this. And he had a Goblin Welder out that lets you put an artifact in play under target player's control. So, like, when I Mindslavered him, I could just bring the Mindslaver back on my side. I'm like, oh, well, that worked out nicely for me. Sometimes people just walk into the combo in for you, which is amazing. So you like the older style cards, right, for Reanimation? Is there any particular reason you like leaning into the stuff like Chainer or Strands of Night or something?
Not really. I was watching EDH gameplay online, and I think it was Commander versus. I was just like, I'm watching these to learn cards because there's a lot of cards I don't know in existence. Sure. And then I was watching a game on Chainer. I'm like, that deck seems awesome. So for Chainer was just, I stumbled across a legendary creature that lets me reanimate, and I'm like, yes. Yes, this is now my deck, and I played it one time, and I'm like, I lost this game, but I love this deck.
It's always interactive. I've noticed with Chainers, like there's never someone who just plays that game and winds up not doing things. It lets you play like you're playing EDH. There's a lot happening there. I think that's at least for me attractive. I think it is for a lot of people as well, particularly with Chainer.
And Strands of Night I just stumbled upon as, this is on repeat. I have a Crucible of Worlds in this deck, so sacking a swamp isn't the worst thing in the world. If I have Crucible out, I can play that as my land for turn. And it can, if Chainer costs a bajillion mana in my command zone, I can reanimate Chainer with Strands of Night to reanimate other things.
That sounds like the way to just achieve so much value no one else can deal with it for sure.
Yep.
So Max, you were doing some shenanigans with Resummoning Skeleton last week, I believe, in your zombie deck.
I was.
What were you primarily doing with that for value in that deck?
So yeah, I run Tormod the Desecrated, I think. Let me just pull my deck list up here. Architect. And so what Tormod says is, whenever a card leaves your graveyard, make a 2/2 zombie token creature tapped. And so running cards like Reassembling Skeleton or Scrap Trawler, I believe is the other one, that essentially say pay mana, bring it back to the graveyard, to the battlefield. It's just a way to get value. You build all these tokens up, and then the game plan would be, if I have enough mana, to be able to cast Kamal. And Kamal is essentially just an overrun in your command zone, giving everything +3/+3 and trample. So the overall goal of the deck is build this army of zombie tokens, and then cast Kamal and Wreck Face.
Go wide and then buff all those things, all those wide things before you swing it.
Right.
How often did Kamal actually, when you played the deck last week and got your first real reps, how often was that relevant in your gameplay?
None, because someone decided to reality shift it or resculpt or something.
I definitely did at least one time.
Yeah, it was you. Specifically talking about you. Before you go to attack, I'm going to get rid of it. I'm like, well, then I lose. I lose the game now. Thanks, Dana.
I am history's greatest monster.
Yes.
You removed your fair share of things from my board as well, I believe, over the course of those several days.
No, you got pictures? You got nothing.
I can't prove it, so it didn't happen.
Yep.
Max doesn't run removal. Oh, Max, you're such a... I lied about being no spoilers coming out for the next couple weeks, so I guess that could be your untruth for the week. Max, do you have anything you want to ask here or throw out there quick?
No, I don't. I've been enjoying listening to the person who knows more about reanimation than I do, so...
Tristan, are there any final bullet points you want to touch on here?
So, one thing. With the whole... I like playing old cards that have to do with reanimation. There are a lot of good old cards. People are like, it's old, it's not good. I'm like, no, look at this card. Now watch me kill you with this card. Now, is it a bad card? No.
That feels so good.
Yes.
One thing about the old stuff, too, I think, is a lot of times they baked in maybe more powerful downsides in older cards than they do today. Like this thing you can do, but it's going to cost you some amount of life or something. That tends to be what else impactful in EDH, too. So, there's old cards people have forgotten about because there's those downsides. But those downsides are much more minimal in Commander.
Or sometimes they're not
Arena,
bad.
Yeah. Like Phyrexian Arena wasn't a big deal at all until Commander, because that's a expensive card to cast in another format. It's kind of slow and it deals damage to you. Whereas in Commander, slow is much more relative and the amount of damage it deals is much less impactful as well. It's like a lot of those things, just there's a big difference between how those old cards especially, how much of a downside those downsides really are in our format.
And sometimes the downsides really aren't downsides, like sacking or twice a creature.
Absolutely.
That's a good thing. You can bring that creature back with what you sacrificed it with.
The dredge problem, where the downside to dredge is actually the upside, and just nobody noticed it in playtesting.
Yeah.
So you started with that Flashback Commander, which is also graveyard stuff, I guess. So you began that was the Savin deck, I believe, correct? Yeah. Savin the Chronoclast?
I changed the Commander off right away though to the one that lets you play off the top of your library.
Okay, sure.
So it was
the Infinite.
Yeah. It was the pre-con, but I wasn't doing a lot of flashback stuff.
Okay, so right away you started at least playing a deck that had graveyard stuff going on. Like if someone wants to take their first real shot at playing reanimation decks that they haven't really done that before, do you have any recommendations for like where to start or what commander would make for a good start?
So it depends on, of course, how you want to reanimate stuff. But like my Cephas deck is really, really good at just getting back out there. And Cephas, because of the way other than the Cephas herself, dungeons in Commander are really like, it's dungeons, it's bad. So people tend to not look at you until you're looping Karmic Guide 3 times to get your Radiant Solar and then just killing people with Radiant Solars, because that card is probably the most busted card in that precon. But even just building a Cephas deck by itself, my original Cephas deck was a $50 budget deck.
Oh, nice.
So it's not anymore because I like Cephas a lot, but you can build a pretty strong 3-color Cephas deck with it. One thing is really good is Cephas doesn't care if things die. So you can actually only have Cephas on the field and just as a cycle discard cards and you'll trigger Cephas and bring out one of those creatures. So there's a lot of good cards with plane cycling. And if you run a lot of those cycle lands that have 2 land types, you can hit your colors and go get a big beefy creature on turn 5 or so if you play it right.
There's a ton of value to be had there in a whole bunch of different ways, for sure. You said you have a Marin deck, right?
Yes.
How new player friendly do you think Marin would be to play?
So Marin was like my second deck I built. Like I've made a lot of changes, or second Reanimation. I've made a lot of changes since I built her. But as what Max said earlier about it's Marin. A lot of people who've been playing since when Marin first came out go, it's Marin, and attack you because you're playing Marin. Even if you have like 2 lands on turn 6, they'll still attack you because you're playing Marin. Like Marin's an amazing. I love her. She's in my top 5 or top 3 favorite commanders with Mono Black Chainer. But you definitely have to be prepared of being targeted with her, and I wouldn't recommend that as your first, hey, here's the Reanimation. Take this commander that literally half of EDH hates. Half the player base has bad memories of. Not necessarily the best.
Yeah, it definitely didn't help that that commander was everywhere at first, too, when it first came out, for sure.
Yeah. I get targeted a lot of Marin just because it's Marin.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, hey, Tristan, thanks a lot for coming on the show and helping us delve into this here a little bit. Does anyone have any final thoughts they want to share on doing reanimation stuff in Commander in general?
So I will say something that I think if Chris was here, he would say. I think the benefit of a reanimation deck style is that your graveyard is essentially your second hand. And I think that's a huge advantage and quite possibly a disadvantage of those type of decks. Just because, you do have that whole graveyard, so you don't have to worry about like discarding something because you're probably going to bring it back. But you also have to be careful that you just don't throw, that Kukushko into your graveyard on turn 2 or something, or that Jin-Gitaxias, because you don't want to paint that target on your back immediately.
Yeah, I think that it's definitely a strategy that can, even like Tristan talked about, everyone gunning for the Marin player. Short of, land destruction or hand destruction, I guess, it's definitely one of the ways to get the bullseye painted on you right away once players see you're doing graveyard shenanigans, I think, for sure, because it is so powerful, and I think it's recognized as such. So yeah, that's the tricky thing, is to be able to do it without having everyone immediately start swinging for you. Mm-hmm. Tristan, do you find that like table talk helps it at all? Are there any ways you can kind of like politic some of that threat away from you?
Sort of. You can do the whole, if it's not Kukusho or Jin-Gitaxias,
sure.
Which you guys have mentioned Jin-Gitaxias a lot tonight or today.
Max's favorite card.
Yeah. Have you guys gotten turn 2 Jin-Gitaxias before?
You know what? I've had it done to me. I want to say like 5 or 6 years ago. I don't know if I've even seen a Jin-Gitaxias in a deck. at least that someone's played or that I've not seen one actually in play in years. So it's been a long time. That just always pops up as kind of like the perfect, heartbreaking way to end a game, is someone doing that Entomb to reanimate a Jin-Gitaxias immediately. But yeah, no, I've not even seen Jin-Gitaxias in a game in forever, let alone like had someone do that.
Okay. It's just been mentioned a lot, and I'm like, I'm thinking like, has this happened? But
yeah, it's a rough way to go, but yeah, it's a thing.
So yeah, but about table talk, sort of. If it's not the Cuckoo Show or Gray Merchant or any of those, you can sort of mitigate it. Like if it's
sure.
I know a lot of people dislike Noxious Gearhulk because it's just 6 mana, destroy 1 creature. But when it turns into 3 mana, gain life, destroy 1 creature, it becomes a pretty good creature. And it's a 5/6.
That's way better than.
Yeah, but you can sort of do the this creature isn't going to hurt your board unless you're winning. No, it's not going to do that. This creature won't. This other creature in my hand will, but I'm not telling you that sentence. That
seems like very much the Max Crandall school of politicking.
Yeah, don't hit me. I'm not doing anything. We're just sitting here.
Not doing anything yet.
Yeah,
but yeah,
or that's future you's problem, not right, present right. You.
I mean, I'm not gonna. I mean, that's also how I tend to play. So it's not just you, Max. That tends to be me as well. I'm on board with all of that.
Yep, but it's a little hard because at this point, Reanimation has gotten a sort of notion because there are a lot of popular people that do podcasts with Mr. Dana Roach right here that like Reanimation. So it's a little harder to do the whole "oh no" thing, but people tend to. I noticed that if you're playing Reanimation slowly, like you're not doing the turn 2 Reanimations or anything, or if you do like what I call value Reanimations, like in my Marin deck, I have at multiple points actually cast the Reanimation to get a Secure Tribe Elder out, so I can hit my land drop to sack it to go get land. People tend to do like, hey, that person's actually doing stuff. Let's all focus on him. And that allows you to start building up your graveyard more. It's more the play slowly to try to get your graveyard working.
I think that's a lot of times good advice that a lot of people can benefit from, is slowing their roll just slightly based on situation. I think that's actually kind of generally useful advice. So, well, hey, Tristan, thanks a lot for coming on the show, and thanks a lot for supporting us on Patreon for the last year. We appreciate it. It means a lot.
Thank you for having me. Supporting you guys have been a lot of fun.
Well, I think that is going to wrap up episode 298 of Commander Central. We'll be back next week with Chris, and we will kind of do some wrap up here for the year, and maybe talk a little bit about what we're going to do for show 300 that's just around the corner.
Oh, wow, that is, isn't it?
we're almost there, yeah. So until then, I am Dana. You can find me on the Twitter birds at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDRCentral_Max, and you can find Chris at WiseSquishy1. Our show is edited by Rafael Garcia. You can find them on Twitter at Bearwalker, and our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, licensed via Creative Commons. We will be back next week with another show. Until then, I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Tristan.